Hello, I think we are live. Welcome. Um, we are going to get started in just a couple minutes. Welcome to this program. Today we are continuing our History Chats series for this month of Veterans You Should Know. And so we'll get into that in just a couple minutes. If you're joining us live, just kind of hang out for a couple minutes here. We will be getting started at 12:30. If you are watching this after the fact, feel free to just skip ahead a couple minutes if you don't want to sit around and wait, because you can do that. Yeah. Okay. While we're waiting, let me tell you about some stuff. First, thanks to our sponsor, Yankee Bookstore, for sponsoring History Speaks and History Chats this year. So make it possible for us to do this. And of course, all of our members and people who donated and all of that to make it possible for us to, as a museum, as a historical society, continue to exist. If you're not already a member, I would say it's a great way if you're enjoying these programs or just generally want to support local history. It's a great way to do that. More information for that is on our website, marathoncountyhistory.org, or you can give us a call, come on in, and learn more about that. And if not, if you're just coming here to see the talk, that's great too. Appreciate that as well. As I said, today we are continuing our theme for Veterans You Should Know alongside Veterans Day for this month. Next, we're actually going to take next week off for Thanksgiving, so there won't be a program on Thanksgiving. We're going to take a moment and give thanks and not put together a program. So hopefully you understand that. We will be back in December, however, and I can reveal maybe. Let's see. Hey, there's our theme for next month. We're going to close out this year and look at next year. Next year is actually going to be our 70th anniversary. The Marathon County Historical Society started back in 1952, so 70 years. And we're going to take kind of look back at not just our history, but the history of history, I guess, if that makes sense. We're going to look at the various different attempts and eras that we have looked through the lens of the past. Starting with Gary Gisselman is going to be in on the 2nd, December 2nd, to talk about walking tours and historical surveys and that sort of thing in like the 90s kind of becomes popular. And then we'll talk about Logjam, sort of the early museum and sort of the philosophy of Ed Schoenberger, if you guys remember Ed back in the 60s and 70s as the runner of the organization here. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about just generally before there was a historical society. And then we'll finally take the last, on December 30th, we'll have our events coordinator, Cheryl DeCalti, in, and she will be talking about what to look for next year. What are we looking for in 2022? So I think it'll be a interesting program. I have some new faces doing some programs here, so look forward to see them and the programs that they're going to be talking about. Okay, so I think that's all the business here we have. Just going to vamp for a second. Okay, yeah, I think we're ready to go. So, as I said, today we are going to be finishing up our month of Veterans You Should Know, and we're going to have a guest here, and I guess this is a good time to introduce to you Ron. Ron Draeger is I guess I didn't ask if you have official title or anything, but he's representing the Spencer Area Historical Society this afternoon, and he's going to be telling us about a local veteran from the Spencer area. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Ron, if you want to jump in here.
Okay, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to have veterans that I can represent. I'm going to do something a little bit different. You've done a great job with Bennett Moulter and Bill Hayes. Unfortunately, these people are deceased, and they never really got to see the recognition that you have been giving them. And so I think it's a great opportunity for me to feature a veteran, a small town boy that gave back to his community once he got out of the service. Um, I've known Lawrence Beal for 30 years, and it was 18 years before I even knew that he was a Korean veteran and that he was a Purple Heart recipient. Uh, he didn't really get recognized until 50 years after the beginning of the Korean War. In the year 2000, there was a newspaper article featuring him. And he was, at that time, 50 years after the beginning of the war, he finally received his Purple Heart. He had the opportunity when he first left the service, he would have to go to some presentation, and he opted out not to go to the presentation. And so he didn't receive a Purple Heart at that time. But 50 years later, when they were celebrating the anniversary of the Korean War, he finally received one in the mail. I'm going to okay. This is Lawrence Beal. As I said, he served in the Korean War. This would be a little bit more factual representation of what he looks like as a civilian. Larry is now 94 years old. He still lives in his home. He has friends that help him from time to time. Lawrence grew up on a farm just 2 miles south of Spencer. And, back then, during World War II, most of the farms still used horses. This is a picture of Larry's dad. But Larry grew up working with the horses and doing a lot of hand labor as a farm boy. Here's Larry. You can see they're cutting corn with a corn knife, loading it on wagons, feeding it into the silo filler, all strenuous work. And it was hard for a farm boy to have any special time. Larry did take time out to play basketball in high school. And he was proud of his performance there. You can see the date here, 1945. So this is the end of World War II, and he's still a high school student. And so he would not have been available for World War II, but he was 22 years old when he finally got drafted, okay? I don't want to get into what was going on in Korea at this time, but the fighting was getting pretty bad over there, and so the draft started up again. Here's a picture of Larry when he was in Fort Polk, Louisiana. I'm going to read something from this newspaper article. Although the Korean War was often termed the Forgotten War, many area Korean War veterans aren't as likely to forget the event. This year marks it says the 50th in that newspaper article, but now it's actually 61 years since the beginning of the Korean War. Lawrence Beal today can't forget the experience in Korea. Sometimes in the middle of the night, a helicopter will fly over and I'll wake up terrified, Beal said. Beal was wounded in Korea and received a distinguished Purple Heart for his service to our country. On October 24th, 1950, Bilo was inducted into the Army and sent to Camp Polk, Louisiana. There, he received his basic training and became a part of the 45th Thunderbird Division. This 45th was actually a National Guard in southwestern United States. And so here now, even the National Guards are getting called up. This National Guard was made up from 4 states: Oklahoma, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. And because of the Indian heritage of a lot of the citizens of those states, they selected the Thunderbird for their patch. And the colors on that patch actually represent the Mexican flag. And if you remember, those 4 states were actually once part of Mexico. He left with his platoon on March 31st aboard a ship which traveled from New Orleans through the Panama Canal to Hokkaido, Japan. So here they're traveling aboard a ship. So they're taking the long way around, leaving Louisiana, going through the Panama Canal, across the Pacific Ocean to Hokkaido, Japan, which is the northernmost island of Japan. Here's the checkpoint when they were stationed in Japan. In Japan, they did some more advanced training before actually going to Korea. Here he is with some Japanese citizens. Once he finished his advanced training in Japan, they left on like launches from Japan and left for South Korea. This is the Korean version of identifying them as the 45th Division. So this is one of the launches that they used to travel in. I don't know if it happened at this time or later on when they were traveling, but while traveling in a launch, they actually hit another ship or another craft. And during that time, Larry's helmet came forward and broke his nose. It was that hard of a hit when the 2 ships collided. And he says he's had breathing problems to this day because he had broke his nose. They had to wait for a high tide in order to come aboard. They came into the southern edge of South Korea called Busan and make a landing there. The watercraft made the journey to South Korea, where they made a night landing on the beaches of Busan. From there, the soldiers were transferred by rail, truck, and finally on foot to the front line to replace the worn and wearied men of the 1st Cavalry. During this time, so many of the people from North Korea and from Seoul, because they were being raided by the North Koreans, there was a whole line of refugees coming south. And of course, when they saw the Americans and stuff, here they only have what they're carrying on their back. And so they depended on the Americans for handouts and for food. So he mentioned that they went by rail to make it up to the 38th parallel. This had been held by the 1st Cavalry. And it turns out I actually had an uncle that served in the 1st Cav. So he was there before Larry and had done most of the fighting over there uh, on the 38th parallel, and now they're getting replaced. So here's Korea, north and south, and here's the 38th parallel. Uh, the Americans, or I should say the NATO forces, because there's quite a few countries that fought alongside the United States. They actually made it further north into North Korea, and here was a truce line that they had set up in 1953 when they actually stopped the fighting. Bilo was part of the offensive group who pushed the North Koreans back to the 38th parallel. When combat and shelling began, Bilo would take his position in the heavy mortar company. The mortars had a 3-mile range. This is part of the line, and these are various battles that were fought on this line trying to hold back the North Koreans. When I talked to Larry, he mentioned that he remembered some of these hills that they fought for, Old Baldy, Pork Chop Hill. And I thought it was kind of interesting. I might have a picture here later. Jane Russell Hill. You can imagine the imagination of some of the soldiers after having not seen women for a while. They think about ladies back home. Here's Jane Russell Hill. Got 2 points on the top of the hill. And here's the men with their tank. So Larry's job was with heavy mortar. And as I mentioned, the mortar had a 3-mile range. Just what Bilo said. He says, I could send 7 mortars into the air before the first one hit. Bilo said his mortar barrel was rifled, which made its hits more accurate. During the battle, North Koreans came by the thousands, Bilo said. Their view of the value of human life is low. The first people would come running and throw themselves on the barbed wire so the people after them could walk on top of them and get past the barricades. These mortars weigh 25 pounds apiece. And in the time that it would take to travel 3 miles, Larry said he could put 7 of those into that mortar tube and send them off. No hearing protection. Here, they're just taking their hands and covering their ears. And when you dropped one in and when it blasted out of the mortar tube, you better have your heads down below the opening of the mortar tube because the blast was so strong. Often the North Koreans and the Chinese would dress like South Koreans and mix in with the common people. American soldiers always had to be alert for an attack from whom they assumed to be harmless. When in Korea, Bilo had many close calls, barely escaping death. The first time is when he stepped directly on a landmine, but because the ground was frozen all around, the mine and the detonator didn't depress. Here's a picture of a landmine. Okay, and a lot of them were made partially out of wood, and so it was hard to detect with metal detectors. But this would be completely buried with just a couple of these probes here, and when you would touch one of those, you'd lose a leg or be completely killed. And like I say, Larry had a close call when he stepped on his. The ground was frozen, and so the earth didn't give way. And that saved his life. The second near miss was when Bilo was near the front line, and when a Navy Black Panther jet roared overhead, the men on the ground waved as the jet went by, recognizing it as one of their own. But the pilot must have confused about their identity and began shooting at them while making a strafing run. The bullets barely missed Bilo. The third narrow escape was when Bilo and two other men went out to investigate an army tank that had run over a mine and the track was blown off. It was the group's duty to see if the tank was salvageable. So here's one of the tanks. But as the three neared the wreckage, they were fired upon, suddenly realizing that they had walked into an ambush. During the assault, the men became separated. Bilo saw only one opportunity to escape death. He crawled into a narrow opening beneath the tank. Soon the North Korean soldiers came to investigate. They were so close to his hiding spot, Bilo said he could even smell them. So here's Larry crawled in underneath the tank. Bilo waited until the next day to make his escape, but the odds of making it back to camp in daylight were not good, so he decided to wait until night. Bilo made it back to the camp under the cover of darkness, but he had one more obstacle to overcome. As he approached the camp, the guards shouted to him to halt and to give the password. But since the passwords changed every day, he had not been gone more than one day, and he was in danger of being shot by his own fellow soldiers. So he didn't get the new password, and so when he was halted, he didn't know what the password was. After a long interrogation at a distance, the guards were convinced that it was Bilo, and they let him into the camp. Part of the interview that I gave to Larry, I recorded, and this is going to be a recording of just a few items that he talked about.
Well, Fort Polk, that's in Louisiana now, and it was closed up after the Second World War. So when they drafted us and we went there, the damn thing was, roofs were leaking and steps were off, and grass was this high. But it probably was better for us in the long run that we went through this as opposed to have walk in and everything was just right, you know. So it's but they weren't up to full standards, so that's why I got drafted in there. So, and believe it or not, they didn't like me because I was from the north. They were still fighting the Civil War. They were still fighting the Civil War. So, you know. Like me and other people, we just simply forgot about that a long time ago, you know. Well, I got pretty good with the damn mortar. Up to about 3 miles, I could put them in a barrel. So, and well, we would fire for effect, you know. They wanted a lot of fire real quick, just as fast as you could throw them down there. But every time you drop on it, you better get your head below the muzzle of the barrel, it'll blow your ears right off. So, well, that's kind of funny, you know. I went out, we lost a tank because of the track didn't come off. So me and two other guys, they sent out there to see if it paid to try to salvage it and recuperate it. Well, we got out there. What happened? We walked into a damn a group that was waiting for us, and I crawled. Well, there ain't much room. I said, good thing I was small, and I crawled underneath there. Well, then the bad part about it was the next day when I headed back for camp, you get a password every day. and I didn't have the password. So to stick your own gun at me like that. So yeah, you get the, but it's it was a real experience, and I wouldn't want to do it again, but I'm glad I did.
So those, that's nice that I was able to visit with Larry while he's still alive. And I'm going to present this recording to him with his friends, and maybe get a copy to his son that lives in Minnesota. I did print off a patch, and I'm going to present that to him. 45th Division, Korea, and these would be the medals that he would receive for his service. The North Koreans were masters of camouflage, trenches and tunnels, he said. Often Beale would find bunkers which had been burrowed into the mountainside. They would do their work at night, carrying and dumping the discarded dirt into the streams so there would be no evidence. Beale was getting so close to being relieved from the front lines, he was counting the days. That was when the North Koreans and the Chinese hit the platoon, and they hit them hard. The battle was fierce, and the concussions from near explosions rocked the area. The pounding was so fierce, both eardrums and blood vessels in Beale's eyes burst. He was emergency evacuated by a small helicopter to a hospital where he was treated, and then he was sent to Seoul, South Korea, and then Japan. Eventually, he received word that he was going home. I was nowhere prepared for what would happen in San Francisco, he said. As he and other soldiers stepped on shore from the ship, they were met by angry protesters who yelled vulgar words at them and even spit at them. I'll never forget that feeling. One day you're doing everything for the people of your country, and then you're yelled at and spit upon. I was traumatized, he said. He is also disturbed that no one in the States would recognize what he and his fellow soldiers had done. And I think, that's why they call it the Forgotten War. Beale was honorably discharged at Fort McCoy, and he returned home. 3 to 4 weeks later, Beale received a letter in the mail. At first, he was frightened to open it, but he gave in to his curiosity and found out that he was to receive a Purple Heart Medal for his sacrifice during his service. Opting not to appear for a formal ceremony, he wrote back and indicated that he preferred that they would send him the medal in the mail. Now, after 50 years, Congress has approved medals for veterans of the Korean War. Beale recently received his medals and proudly displays them along with his Purple Heart Medal. I'm proud of what I did, he said. I would do it again if I knew it would make this a better place. All the freezing and hunger and suffering is worth it. So that happened 20 years ago when he finally received his medal. This is the newspaper article that I was referring to. Here's a picture of him, and like I said, he proudly displays it. That newspaper article, I have that on display down in our museum. Oh, I'm gonna make an announcement over here. This Sunday, November 21st, between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., our museum will be open. So if anybody wants to stop on by, the Historic Museum in Spencer will be open. This is the display we have down in the museum. After Larry got out of the service, originally he had worked for Spencer Milk Products right here in Spencer. So Larry never left Spencer. He grew up here. He worked all his life here, raised his family here. He worked for a while then for Parkin Dairy in Marshfield when he first got out. But then he came back to where he had been working, Land O'Lakes. I worked with Larry at Land O'Lakes, and he was an excellent supervisor. Um, I think I have some of the things that he did. Larry was a supervisor for the drying department. Larry helped develop the formulation of cheese flavoring ingredients of the, if you're acquainted with Frito-Lay's, the Cheetos and the cheese popcorn, Larry helped develop the flavoring for that, and we made that at Land O'Lakes in the drying department. He also devised the procedure for making cheese coloring and using vegetable oil dyes. The coloring ordinarily had to be purchased, and he devised a way of using, so it was a cheaper way of making dyes right there at Land O'Lakes instead of having to purchase it. He also found a way of using cheese fines. This is a crumbly cheese that's normally not available for packaging. And he found a way of using this for making powdered cheese. And he gave special attention on certain Mondays startups. We made cheese, kosher cheese, okay? And so there was a special ritual that you had to do with cleaning, and the rabbi would come in and even do a blessing over the equipment. And this is something that we did at Land O'Lakes. 28 years ago, Larry lost his wife, Marlene, at age 59 due to an accident that happened in their home. Larry had been considered by Russia to go to that country and share his expertise in the food processing industry. This is something that would be nice if we could have again. The foundation of Russian-American relations, both our friendship and our capacity to work together as two great nations, ultimately rest on how well ordinary citizens on both sides understand each other. That is why the US government believes that is most important contribution that we can make to a stronger Russian-American relationship is to invest in expanding the knowledge and contacts among the people of both countries. As a result, the US government exchange programs, more than 50,000 Russians and Americans have had the opportunity to take part in academic or professional exchanges during the past decades. Larry never did make it to Russia after his wife's death, but he was qualified to do that and was willing to go to Russia and share some of his information. I'm kind of looking at the clock. I was given an amount of time. Ben, can I turn it over to you and see if you have any questions?
Yeah. I think it's a good good ending, maybe ending point here. I know you had more, but
Yes.
but I think there's also I'm really glad that you did include this because the other examples of the veterans that we talked about, they left town. They weren't, or maybe even weren't really local here. But most of the veterans in our community, after they get back, they contribute, and just like Mr. Bilo did, are important members of the community. So I'm glad that we got a little bit of the life after the his service. Yeah, I guess if anybody has any questions specifically about this or comments or whatever, we'll have an opportunity to do that. I'll give you a couple minutes here or a minute or so to type those in if you have any. I wanted to ask, just you got your mention here of the museum being open. I wanted to give you maybe an opportunity to say a little bit more about that. If people are interested, is there, I was trying to find the address I could kind of give that. Do you want to just kind of put that out there? Where do you go if you're interested coming this Sunday?
Okay, in downtown Spencer, we have the old hall, the old village hall. The museum is in that building. It's right across the railroad tracks on Highway 98 in downtown Spencer.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a great place, and of course they have a Facebook page and you can find more information, get in touch with them if you have questions. But I don't know that I got there when it's actually been open, but I was got a chance to take a look at the museum while he was getting up and running. It's a great little haven of information about Spencer history. So highly recommended if you're in the area. It's a good place to go. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure, again, we really appreciate Ron coming on and talking and representing not only the Spencer area, but might as well give the opportunity to let people know about the historical society over there.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah. Well, I'm not seeing any questions popping up, and I know it's about 1:00 here, so I think we'll maybe call that a day. So again, I want to thanks for this wonderful history about Lawrence Below, and thanks to all of you for joining us. Yeah.
And thank you to Marathon County Historical Society for the efforts that they've made. As a fellow veteran, I appreciate what you've done.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We try. All right. Well, I think we'll call it there. Again, we'll hope to see you next month. We're going to be taking the Thanksgiving off, but we'll be back next Thursday after Thanksgiving for some general history stories, and hopefully you join us for that. And we'll see you next time. In the meantime, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everybody.